Hey boys and girls, today we are going to talk about heroin trafficking in Singapore. As you may know from my previous video on drug trafficking, in Singapore, trafficking does not merely involve carrying a suitcase through the airport. In Singapore, drug trafficking includes giving drugs to a friend or selling drugs, even a small minute amount of drugs. If you sell a small amount of drugs, you will be guilty of drug trafficking. Now, in Singapore, under the Misuse of Drugs Act, if you are found to possess more than 2 grams of heroin, you are presumed to have the heroin, the drug, you presume to have it for trafficking unless you rebut the presumption. That means the onus is on you, the burden is on the accused who is found with the heroin to prove that he did not possess the heroin for the purposes of trafficking. I will discuss 4 cases today involving heroin trafficking, and the cases involve increasing amount of drugs. In the case of Lim Chun Meng and public prosecutor, the offender pled guilty to a charge of trafficking by selling 1 straw of heroin, 1 straw containing 0.01 grams of heroin, to an undercover CNB officer, also known as a narcotics officer, for $16. I repeat, he sold 0.01 grams of heroin for 16 Singapore dollars. In addition to the charge of selling the heroin to the officer, another charge for possession was taken into consideration, and he was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment and 5 strokes of the cane. He was whipped 5 times. In Ramdan and public prosecutor, the offender was found in possession of 13 sachets containing 5.18 grams of heroin. He pled guilty on the basis of the presumption under the Misuse of Drugs Act, Section 17, which essentially means that if you are found more than 2 grams, you are presumed to be trafficking. So he pled guilty, and because he had 4 previous convictions for drugs, he was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment and 6 strokes of the cane. He was whipped 6 times. In the case of Muhammad Zuhairi and public prosecutor, the offender claimed trial. He disputed the charge. He claimed trial to 3 charges. 1, a charge for trafficking 9.91 grams of heroin, possession of 0.58 grams of heroin, and possession of drug utensils. In Singapore, it is actually a criminal offense to possess utensils or instruments used for the purposes of taking drugs. So, the offender pled guilty to a consumption charge, and after he was convicted of the first 3 charges, basically trafficking, possession, and possession of utensils, the judge also noted that he had a string of antecedents, previous convictions, which included trafficking, consumption, possession, offences involving violence, and other theft offences. The judge found that the offender was a hardcore criminal who played a significant role in this trafficking operations, and the quantity of heroin, which was at 9.96, was also substantial. Therefore, he was sentenced to 24 years imprisonment and 15 strokes of the cane. In the case of PP and Dahalan, the accused claimed trial to a capital charge of trafficking 24 sachets containing a total of 28.36 grams of heroin. In Singapore, if you traffic more than 15 grams of heroin and you are found guilty, you will be hanged. And in his defense, the accused, Dahalan, told the court that the 24 sachets were for his own consumption and for the consumption of his friend, a person called Sanusi. The court found that the offender was a severe drug addict and was satisfied. He was convinced that part of the drugs part of the 28 grams of heroin were for his own consumption. So he rebutted the presumption that he was trafficking, for sale and whatever. So since he rebutted the presumption that he was trafficking the drug, since he's a severe drug addict, he was using the heroin for his own self, the court did not convict him on the original charge, the capital charge where he would be hanged, but substituted the words not less than 10 grams but not more than 15 grams of heroin for the possession of 28 grams. In addition, the offender pled guilty to one charge of consumption. He was sentenced to a total of 23 years imprisonment and 6 strokes of the cane for the trafficking charge and 1 year's imprisonment for the consumption charge. So thanks for watching this video on heroin trafficking.